In the quiet streets of Ridgewood Heights, a picturesque suburban neighborhood, the Montgomery residence stood as a testament to success and domestic harmony. The house, a beautifully restored Victorian, was home to Marissa and Trevor Montgomery, a couple who seemed to have it all: successful careers, a close-knit circle of friends, and a marriage that others often admired. Their life was the picture of contentment, a shining example of what hard work and devotion could achieve. However, beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, there were cracks. Cracks that would eventually lead to a tragedy no one could have foreseen. For the past 2 years, Marissa and Trevor had been active participants in a local swinging community, a lifestyle choice they had embraced in an attempt to reignite the passion in their decade-long marriage. Initially, this foray into consensual non-monogamy seemed to strengthen their bond. They found themselves more open, more honest with each other, and the thrill of their new experiences brought a renewed sense of excitement into their lives. But what began as a mutual exploration soon became a source of deep-seated jealousy and resentment, setting the stage for a tragedy that would shock everyone who knew them. Marissa Montgomery was a rising star in the financial sector, known for her sharp mind and determination. She had worked her way up to a senior position at a prestigious investment firm, earning the respect and admiration of her colleagues. With her striking looks and poised demeanor, Marissa exuded confidence. Yet, those closest to her knew that her self-assurance masked a deep insecurity, a lingering doubt about whether she was truly deserving of the success she had achieved. Trevor, on the other hand, was a successful architect with a reputation for innovation and creativity. His designs were sought after by clients who valued his eye for detail and his ability to blend modern aesthetics with classic elegance. Unlike Marissa, Trevor was laid back, with an easygoing charm that made him popular among their friends. He was the kind of person who could strike up a conversation with anyone, and his affable nature made him the perfect complement to Marissa's more intense personality. The couple had met during their senior year of college. Marissa had been drawn to Trevor's calm and steady demeanor, while Trevor was captivated by Marissa's ambition and drive. Their whirlwind romance quickly led to a proposal, and they married a year later in a ceremony that was the talk of their social circle. For the first few years, their marriage was everything they had hoped for. They traveled extensively, built successful careers, and created a home that was the envy of their friends. However, as they approached their mid-30s, a sense of restlessness began to creep into their relationship. The passion that had once been the cornerstone of their marriage had dimmed, replaced by a comfortable routine that, while pleasant, lacked the spark that had once drawn them together. It was Marissa who first suggested they explore new avenues to reignite their passion. She had always been the more adventurous of the two, and after reading about consensual non-monogamy, she broached the subject with Trevor. At first, Trevor was hesitant. The idea of sharing his wife with others made him uncomfortable, but he could see how excited Marissa was about the prospect. She painted a picture of increased intimacy and shared adventures, and after months of discussions and research, Trevor agreed to give it a try. They started by attending a few workshops on open relationships and soon found themselves creating profiles on swinger websites. Their first experience was a soft swap with another couple, and to their surprise, it was exhilarating. Over the next few months, Marissa and Trevor became regulars in the local swinging scene. They attended parties at upscale clubs, participated in intimate gatherings at private homes, and even organized a few events themselves. Their social circle expanded rapidly, filled with like-minded couples who shared their desire for excitement and sexual exploration. Marissa thrived in this new environment, her confidence soaring as she embraced her sexuality in ways she had never imagined. Trevor, too, initially enjoyed the lifestyle, he found that the attention he received from other women was an ego boost, and the couple's sex life reached new heights of passion and intensity. They experimented with fantasies and kinks they had never before considered, and for a time it seemed as though swinging had breathed new life into their marriage. However, as the months wore on, subtle changes began to occur in the dynamics of their relationship. While Marissa continued to embrace the lifestyle with enthusiasm, Trevor began to experience feelings he hadn't anticipated. He noticed the way other men looked at Marissa, the ease with which she flirted and connected with their swinging partners. What had once been a source of pride now stirred uncomfortable feelings in the pit of his stomach. Trevor found himself paying closer attention to Marissa's interactions, particularly with one man, Ethan Cole, who had quickly become a regular fixture in their lives. Ethan was a charming, charismatic man who seemed to have a natural connection with Marissa. Trevor couldn't help but notice the lingering touches, the inside jokes, and the way Marissa's eyes lit up in Ethan's presence. Rationally, Trevor knew that this was all part of the lifestyle they had chosen, that Marissa always came home with him at the end of the night. But a nagging voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts, fueling his growing insecurity. Despite his misgivings, Trevor kept his feelings to himself. He didn't want to disappoint Marissa or appear weak in front of their new friends. Instead, he tried to throw himself into the lifestyle with renewed vigor, initiating more encounters and suggesting wilder scenarios, all in an effort to prove something to himself and to Marissa. But deep down, he knew that something had changed between them. Marissa, caught up in the excitement and new experiences, failed to notice the subtle shifts in Trevor's behavior. She interpreted his increased enthusiasm as a sign that he was enjoying the lifestyle as much as she was. In her mind, swinging had brought them closer together, opening up new avenues of communication and shared experiences. As their second anniversary in the lifestyle approached, the Montgomerys were seen as a success story in their swinging circle, attractive, fun, and seemingly more in love than ever. But beneath the surface, the seeds of discord had been sown, and the very lifestyle that had reinvigorated their marriage was now silently driving a wedge between them. The first signs of trouble appeared subtly. Trevor began to make offhand comments about cutting back on their swinging activities, suggesting they focus more on their own relationship. Marissa, interpreting this as a passing mood, gently brushed off his concerns and encouraged him to embrace the freedom and excitement they had discovered. As weeks passed, Trevor's jealousy grew more pronounced. He started to question Marissa about her interactions with other men, particularly Ethan. His inquiries, initially casual, became more frequent and intense. Where once he had enjoyed watching Marissa with other partners, he now found himself averting his eyes, a knot forming in his stomach. Marissa struggled to understand the change in her husband. She repeatedly assured him of her love and commitment, emphasizing that their adventures in swinging were purely physical and did not threaten their emotional bond. But her words seemed to fall on deaf ears as Trevor's insecurities deepened. The tension between them began to spill over into their daily lives. Arguments that started about swinging quickly devolved into broader accusations and recriminations. Trevor would bring up past grievances, questioning Marissa's fidelity even before they had entered the lifestyle. Marissa, frustrated by what she saw as Trevor's irrational behavior, found herself becoming defensive and withdrawn. Their professional lives started to suffer as well. Trevor, usually laser-focused at work, became distracted and irritable. His colleagues noticed the change, whispering about possible troubles at home. Marissa, whose work required creativity and a positive outlook, found it increasingly difficult to meet deadlines and satisfy clients. Despite the growing discord, Marissa was reluctant to give up the lifestyle that had brought her so much joy and self-discovery. She suggested they take a break from group activities and focus on one-on-one encounters, hoping this would ease Trevor's jealousy. But even this compromise led to conflict, with Trevor accusing Marissa of trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. As their arguments intensified, the Montgomerys' facade of domestic bliss began to crumble. In a last-ditch effort to salvage their marriage, Marissa suggested they seek counseling. Trevor agreed, hoping that a professional could help them navigate the complex emotions stirred up by their foray into non-monogamy. However, finding a therapist who was both qualified and non-judgmental about their lifestyle proved challenging, further adding to their frustration. As the date of an upcoming swinger party hosted by Ethan and his wife Claire approached, the tension in the Montgomery household reached a fever pitch. Marissa was determined to attend, seeing it as an opportunity to reconnect with friends and reaffirm their place in the community. Trevor, conflicted and resentful, reluctantly agreed to go, setting the stage for the tragic events that would unfold. The evening of June 5th dawned warm and clear, a perfect summer day. As twilight approached, the Montgomerys began preparing for the party, with an undercurrent of tension thrumming between them. Trevor watched Marissa as she applied her makeup, choosing a slinky red dress that accentuated her curves. A familiar mix of desire and dread coiled in his stomach as he silently wondered if he was making a mistake by attending the event. They arrived at Ethan and Claire's sprawling estate, just as the party was getting started. The expansive garden was bathed in soft, colorful lights, with the sound of laughter and music drifting through the air. Couples and singles mingled, drinks in hand, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Claire, stunning in a silver gown, greeted them warmly, and Marissa quickly became the center of attention, her natural charisma drawing people to her as always. Trevor found himself standing on the sidelines, nursing a drink, as he watched Marissa move effortlessly through the crowd. She seemed to be in her element, her laughter carrying across the garden as she flirted and socialized. In contrast, Trevor felt out of place, the once exhilarating atmosphere now filled with tension. As the night wore on, Trevor noticed Marissa and Ethan deep in conversation, their heads close together as they spoke in low tones. A flicker of jealousy ignited within him, growing into a flame as he watched the two of them exchange what appeared to be knowing glances. Unable to contain himself any longer, Trevor approached them. He caught the tail end of their conversation, something about meeting up later in the week for drinks. Marissa's eyes widened slightly as she noticed Trevor, a flicker of guilt crossing her face before she composed herself. Trevor, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, suggested it was time to leave. Marissa protested, arguing that the night was still young and they had just arrived. Their disagreement, though conducted in hushed tones, drew curious glances from nearby guests. Ethan, sensing the tension, tried to smooth things over, but his intervention only seemed to irritate Trevor further. As the argument threatened to escalate, Claire appeared, smoothly inserting herself into the situation with practiced ease. She guided Trevor and Marissa to a quiet corner of the garden, encouraging them to take a moment to cool off. She offered them water and gentle words of advice, reminding them of the community's emphasis on open communication and mutual respect. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Claire's intervention had diffused the situation. Trevor took a deep breath, visibly trying to calm himself. Marissa reached out, squeezing his hand in a conciliatory gesture. But as they stood to rejoin the party, Trevor caught sight of Ethan watching them intently. Something in the other man's gaze, concern, pity, or perhaps something else entirely, caused Trevor's tenuous control to snap. In a cold, clipped voice, he announced that he and Marissa were leaving. This time, Marissa didn't argue. She could see the storm brewing behind Trevor's eyes and knew that staying would only lead to a scene. Apologizing profusely to Claire and avoiding Ethan's gaze, Marissa allowed Trevor to lead her out of the garden. The drive home was fraught with silence, the tension between them so thick it was almost suffocating. Marissa stared out the window, her earlier vivacity replaced by a weary exhaustion. Trevor gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, his jaw clenched as he navigated the nearly empty streets. As they pulled into their driveway, neither made a move to exit the car immediately. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on them. Finally, Marissa turned to Trevor, her voice soft but firm as she said, "We need to talk about this. We can't go on like this." Trevor nodded stiffly, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Without a word, he got out of the car and headed for the front door. Marissa followed, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the conversation to come would likely change their lives forever. Neither of them could have predicted just how prophetic that feeling would prove to be. As soon as the front door closed behind them, the facade of calm they had maintained in public crumbled. Marissa rounded on Trevor, her face contorted with a mix of anger and frustration. The words tumbled out of her in a torrent of accusations and grievances, all the doubts and fears she had been harboring for months, finally finding a voice. She railed against his jealousy, his constant questioning, and his refusal to accept that their lifestyle choice had been a mutual decision. She accused him of trying to control her, of suffocating her with his insecurities. Trevor, initially stunned by the ferocity of Marissa's outburst, found his own anger rising to meet hers. He defended himself vehemently, reminding her of the promises they had made to each other when they embarked on this journey. He accused her of being selfish, of prioritizing her own desires over their marriage, and of pushing him into situations that made him uncomfortable. Their argument echoed through the house, a cacophony of hurt feelings and misunderstandings. Marissa tried to reason with Trevor, to make him see that his jealousy was unfounded, but her words seemed to bounce off him without making an impact. In frustration, she brought up his own dalliances within the swinging community, asking why it was acceptable for him but not for her. This only served to enrage Trevor further. He advanced on Marissa, his tall frame looming over her as he backed her into a corner of their living room. Marissa, feeling trapped and increasingly frightened by Trevor's uncharacteristic aggression, attempted to push past him. In that moment, something in Trevor snapped. As Marissa tried to move away, he grabbed her arms, his fingers digging into her skin with bruising force. Marissa cried out in pain and surprise, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at the man she had loved for over a decade, suddenly unrecognizable in his fury. She struggled against his grip, her own anger giving way to fear as she realized how out of control the situation had become. Trevor, lost in a haze of jealousy and rage, didn't seem to hear her pleas to let go. In her desperation to break free, Marissa's hand caught Trevor across the face, her nails leaving angry red scratches on his cheek. The physical contact seemed to push Trevor over the edge. With a roar of inarticulate rage, he shoved Marissa hard. She stumbled backward, her heel catching on the edge of the area rug. Time seemed to slow as she fell, her arms flailing as she tried to catch herself, but there was nothing to break her fall, and her head struck the corner of the solid oak coffee table with a sickening thud. The sound seemed to snap Trevor out of his frenzy. He stood frozen, watching in horror as Marissa crumpled to the floor, a small pool of blood beginning to form beneath her head. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Trevor's ragged breathing. For several long moments, he remained rooted to the spot, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Then, as if moving through molasses, he stumbled toward Marissa's motionless form. He fell to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch her. Her skin was still warm, but as he frantically searched for a pulse, he found nothing. The reality of the situation crashed over Trevor like a tidal wave. He had done the unthinkable. In a moment of uncontrolled anger, he had taken the life of the woman he loved. As the enormity of his actions began to sink in, Trevor let out a howl of anguish, cradling Marissa's lifeless body in his arms as tears streamed down his face. In the quiet suburban street outside, a neighbor who had been walking his dog paused, startled by the sound of despair emanating from the Montgomery residence. It was a cry that would haunt the neighborhood for years to come, marking the moment when a loving marriage ended in unimaginable tragedy. The early morning calm of Ridgewood Heights was shattered by the arrival of police cruisers and an ambulance, their lights painting the tree-lined street in alternating flashes of red and blue. Neighbors emerged from their homes, watching the unfolding scene with a mix of curiosity and dread. Detective Laura Frost, a veteran of the Homicide Division, arrived on the scene shortly after the first responders. As she ducked under the crime scene tape, she was struck by the contrast between the manicured exterior of the Montgomery home and the chaos that awaited inside. The living room, once a showcase of tasteful decor, now bore the unmistakable signs of violence. The coffee table was askew, a lamp lay shattered on the floor, and at the center of it all was the body of Marissa Montgomery, partially covered by a sheet. Forensic technicians moved around the room with practiced efficiency, photographing and collecting evidence. Frost's keen eyes took in every detail. Dr. Kai Nakamura briefed her on their initial findings. The cause of death appeared to be blunt force trauma to the head, likely from impact with the corner of the coffee table. Signs of a struggle were evident, including bruises on the victim's arms and defensive wounds on her hands. As Nakamura spoke, Frost's attention was drawn to the figure of Trevor Montgomery, seated on a dining room chair, his head in his hands. He was still wearing the clothes from the previous night's party, now rumpled and stained. A uniformed officer stood nearby, keeping a watchful eye on the distraught husband. Frost approached Trevor, her experienced gaze noting his scratched cheek and the smears of blood on his shirt. In a voice hoarse from crying, he began to speak, weaving a tale of a party, an argument, and a tragic accident. As she listened, Frost's instincts told her there was more to the story than Trevor was revealing. His account seemed rehearsed, lacking the raw emotion one would expect from a man who had just lost his wife. She made a mental note to dig deeper into the couple's background and recent activities. Outside, the neighbors huddled in small groups, exchanging shocked whispers and speculative glances. The Montgomerys had always seemed so happy, so perfect. What could have gone so terribly wrong? In the days following Marissa Montgomery's death, Detective Frost and her team worked tirelessly to piece together the events that led to that fateful night. Their investigation began to reveal a complex web of relationships and hidden tensions that lay beneath the surface of the Montgomerys' seemingly idyllic life. Interviews with friends and colleagues painted a picture of a couple who had recently embraced the swinging lifestyle. While many expressed surprise at this revelation, a select few provided valuable insights into the dynamics of the Montgomerys' open marriage. Ethan Cole, in particular, proved to be a crucial witness, recounting the argument he had witnessed at the party and the obvious tension between Trevor and Marissa. As the detectives delved deeper, they uncovered a trail of digital evidence that shed light on the couple's private life. Text messages and emails revealed Trevor's growing jealousy and Marissa's increasing frustration with his behavior. Particularly damning was a series of messages between Marissa and Ethan, discussing Trevor's recent mood swings and Marissa's concerns about the future of her marriage. Forensic analysis of the crime scene yielded more damning evidence against Trevor. The angle and force of Marissa's fatal injury were inconsistent with a simple fall, suggesting that she had been pushed. DNA evidence under Marissa's fingernails matched Trevor's, corroborating the signs of a struggle. Furthermore, toxicology reports showed that while Marissa had a modest amount of alcohol in her system, Trevor's blood alcohol level had been significantly higher, suggesting he may have been more impaired than he initially claimed. As the investigation progressed, Detective Frost brought Trevor in for a series of intense interrogations. Under the relentless pressure of questioning, his carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. Inconsistencies in his story emerged, and his demeanor shifted from grief-stricken widower to a man consumed by guilt and fear. In a dramatic turn of events, Ethan Cole came forward with additional information. He revealed that Marissa had confided in him about her plans to leave Trevor, citing his increasingly controlling and jealous behavior. This revelation provided a possible motive for Trevor's actions, suggesting that the murder may have been premeditated rather than a heat-of-the-moment crime of passion. The investigation also uncovered financial records indicating that Trevor had recently inquired about the couple's life insurance policy, adding another layer of suspicion to his actions. Friends reported that he had been under increasing stress at work, with rumors of potential layoffs circulating in his company. As the evidence mounted, the prosecution began to build a strong case against Trevor Montgomery. The narrative that emerged was one of a man who, faced with the prospect of losing both his wife and his carefully cultivated image of success, had lashed out in a jealous rage with tragic consequences. The stage was set for a trial that would captivate the city and beyond, promising to expose the hidden world of suburban swingers and the devastating consequences of jealousy unleashed. Prosecutor Vivian Xiao opened the proceedings with a powerful statement, painting a vivid picture of a marriage destroyed by jealousy and a woman's life cut tragically short. She promised to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Trevor Montgomery had murdered his wife in a fit of rage, driven by his inability to control her and his fear of losing her. The defense, led by seasoned attorney Mark Holloway, countered with a narrative of a tragic accident, the result of a loving marriage strained by lifestyle choices that neither party was fully prepared for. Holloway sought to portray Trevor as a devoted husband, overwhelmed by circumstances beyond his control. As the trial progressed, a parade of witnesses took the stand. Ethan Cole and Claire Cole provided crucial testimony about the Montgomerys' involvement in the swinging community and the visible tension between them on the night of Marissa's death. Their accounts were both illuminating and scandalous, causing a stir in the courtroom and generating salacious headlines. Forensic experts presented detailed analyses of the crime scene, with Dr. Kai Nakamura delivering damning testimony about the nature of Marissa's injuries. His assertion that the fatal wound was inconsistent with an accidental fall dealt a significant blow to the defense's case. Perhaps the most dramatic moment of the trial came when Trevor Montgomery himself took the stand. Under Holloway's careful guidance, he presented himself as a man deeply in love with his wife, who had agreed to explore swinging to please her. He spoke of his growing discomfort with the lifestyle and his fears that he was losing Marissa to it. However, under Xiao's relentless cross-examination, Trevor's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. She confronted him with text messages, emails, and witness statements that contradicted his version of events. As the questioning intensified, Trevor's composure slipped, revealing flashes of the anger and jealousy that had led to that fatal night. The gallery watched in rapt attention as Trevor struggled to maintain his story under the prosecution's onslaught. His voice cracked as he recounted the final argument with Marissa, and for a moment it seemed as though he might break down and confess. But he managed to hold himself together, sticking to his claim of a tragic accident to the end. As the trial neared its conclusion, both the prosecution and defense delivered impassioned closing arguments. Xiao urged the jury to see through Trevor's lies and hold him accountable for the brutal act that had ended Marissa's life. Holloway, in turn, pleaded for understanding, asking the jury to consider the complex emotions and circumstances that had led to this tragedy. With the evidence presented and arguments made, the case was turned over to the jury. As they filed out to begin deliberations, a tense hush fell over the courtroom. The fate of Trevor Montgomery now rested in their hands. In the end, the jury took less than 6 hours to reach a verdict. Trevor Montgomery was found guilty of second-degree murder, a decision that sent shockwaves through the community and brought a measure of closure to Marissa's grieving family and friends. The judge, citing the brutal nature of the crime and Trevor's lack of remorse, sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison. The aftermath of the trial left an indelible mark on the community. The case had exposed the hidden world of suburban swingers, leading to heated debates about morality, trust, and the nature of modern relationships. Some couples who had been part of the lifestyle quietly distanced themselves, while others became vocal advocates for ethical non-monogamy, emphasizing the importance of communication and consent. In the end, the tragic story of Trevor and Marissa Montgomery served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the strongest relationships can be undone by jealousy, mistrust, and uncontrolled anger. Their story would be remembered not just as a sensational crime, but as a complex human tragedy born from the eternal struggle between love, desire, and the need for control.